Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Mom Strength. This is your host, Surabhi Veach, and we're going to talk about how to talk to your kids about their bodies, how to empower them about their bodies, how to talk to them, when to talk to them about sex, body parts, private parts, and all sorts of goodness. Now, full disclosure, this is coming from the point of a human, a mom, a pelvic physiotherapist. This is not coming from the perspective of a child psychologist or a mental health therapist at all. The reason I'm even making this episode is because I have heard these requests so many times. I've had my clients ask me, how do you talk to your kids about this? How do you make sure that, it doesn't feel awkward when you're talking to them about penises and vaginas and vulvas? Excuse me, I'm getting over a cough, so if I cough through this episode, I apologize in advance. It's cold and flu season, and I actually lost my entire voice. I had laryngitis on the weekend, so this is progress. But I also understand how annoying it is when you have somebody coughing in your ear, so I apologize. Okay, so my kids are 3 and 5, and I started talking to them about their bodies from the moment they were born. I would start when they were babies during diaper changes. I would verbalize, like narrate essentially what I was doing. So if you have young kids, that's a very easy thing that you could be doing is during a diaper change, you could say, hey, little bubs, it looks like you peed your diaper, or it looks like you had a poop. Let's go change your diaper so your bum stays nice and fresh. And so I'm opening your diaper. I'm going to use the wipes, or I'm going to use the cloth to wipe your vulva from front to back. Now I'm going to wipe around your anus, and I'm going to wipe your butt cheeks because a little bit of poop got on there. And now we're going to apply some bum balm around these spots here, around your anus, around your butt cheeks, so that it doesn't get red. And then we're going to put on a new diaper. And so I narrate it, and this also ties really well with consent. So we often think that babies don't need to be asked consent, because you got to change your diaper, right? So even if they don't want you to change it, you also don't want them to have poop and a diaper rash and be uncomfortable. So sometimes it's a delicate subject, but the way I would approach it is from a sense of, we're going to change your diaper, and wait for them to kind of make eye contact or give me a sign of agreement. I don't remember any circumstance where they were like, really didn't want to change their diaper when they were young, right? So in the first 6 months. As soon as they start to want to roll and crawl and move, then they're fighting diaper changes all the time. Not because they don't want a fresh diaper, but because it's fun, it's a game, it's exciting for them, right? And even with that, I would say things like, okay, we are, let them have fun with it. And then we'd make games out of it, or we would sing special songs around diaper changes to make that a little bit more routine. But whether it was a vulva, whether you have a baby with a vulva or a penis, you can verbalize these things. I'm wiping around your scrotum. I'm lifting up your scrotum. And I'm touching it gently. And so as they get older, they understand these body parts. Babies are smart, y'all. And so if you feel awkward saying these words around adults, start with your baby, because your baby is not going to judge you at all. And so let's say you have an older baby that's on the go, or toddler. They're wanting to come into the bathroom with you all the time. When you're sitting on the toilet, they're in the bathroom with you. And so I like to verbalize what I'm doing. It's like, I'm having a pee, or I'm having a poop. Now, sure, you could be like, I'm urinating. I'm defecating, because those are the technical terms. But peeing and pooping is pretty widely used, even in the medical profession. So I'm less concerned about that. Of course, my kids still know the proper terms because they're kids of a physiotherapist and pelvic physiotherapist, but I'm less worried about it, to be honest. And then when I'm in the bathroom with them, I also get my period. I'm a menstruating person. So it's so easy for me to be like, ask one of my kids, hey, can you get mommy's cup, menstrual cup, or tampon? They've watched me insert both They have watched me wear pads and period underwear. Y'all know I like my NYX period underwear. I also have a discount code with them, which I'll tag to this episode. But they see me do all that. And now, whether you have a boy or a girl or a non-binary child, it is important that all children get exposed to this. I have talked to women who are so embarrassed to talk about this, even in front of their 4-year-old, 6-year-old boys. And to me, that makes no sense. They don't think it's weird that you have blood coming out of your vagina each month. They think it's weird if you think it's weird. They think it's weird when you give off the vibe that you're so uncomfortable talking about this. So I like to talk about it just like I'm talking about it here. Matter of fact, it's like, you know what? Mommy's having a poop. I want some privacy. Can you close the door? You can wait on the other side and we can sing a song, or you can sing me a song. When they were really little, yes, they were 100%. They were in the bathroom with me. But as they got a little bit older and I could trust them to, for 5 minutes without me constantly supervising them, I started asking for privacy and to set that boundary. And guess what? My older one, she started setting that boundary around when she was 4 with poops. She's like, no, I want the door closed. And so I really respect that. And I think that we assume that kids are just like objects. Even from the time they're babies, they're human beings. We need to respect them. Consent is very important. And if we start modeling it at home, even with us ourselves setting boundaries of privacy and space. Because here's the thing I see in most households, from what I've heard anyways, is the kids follow the mom into the bathroom, but they don't follow the dad into the bathroom. And so there, right away, they learn that women's bodies don't deserve privacy, or there's less need to set a boundary or respect the boundary, versus a man, we need to respect that boundary. And so if you are a single parent, if you are a mother, if you identify as a mom, and you're like, my kids have to be in the bathroom with me, they're really young, that's fine. Or perhaps they have a special need and they have to be in the bathroom with you, that's fine. But it's about, as they get older, as they're able, setting the boundaries so that you're not always the person who doesn't get your boundaries respected. Because yes, you're the mom, but you're still a human. And your kids are learning from you and your partner, if you have a partner, from your family, how the world works. And we all know that in general, there's less respect when it comes to respecting women's body autonomy, body space, and I just think it's interesting how that starts in our homes. And oftentimes it's the moms who take the mat leave. It's the moms who are always with baby. It's the moms who the kids are attached to. So it makes sense that the mom is the one who they want to follow into the bathroom. But at some point or the other, if you want to, if you don't care about setting a boundary around that, please don't. These are just ideas that I'm sharing because I've had so many people ask and request for this episode. And, we don't make it a big deal of like, oh, we're going to sit down and learn about our body today. I weave it into everything we're doing. Now, I do also have a pelvis at home. I have a vulva model at home, so it's very easy. But what I've realized is I don't have a penis model at home because I largely work with vulva owners. So it's not like you need a model in your home to teach your children. You don't need a model of the shoulder or the mouth to teach them dental hygiene or, how to move their shoulder. In the same way, a mirror can help, especially with vulva owners, girls, or kids who identify as girls with the vulva. You can use a mirror to show them the parts of their vulva and just say, this is your vulva, so that they get a mental picture of like, oh, this is what it looks like, because they may not be able to bend over and see. And for penises, it's obvious. It's sticking out of the body. Scrotum, it's hanging out there. So it's a little bit more obvious. But even just to see, oh, that's where my anus is. This is where poop comes out of. Whether you have a male baby, a female baby anatomically, or an intersex baby, it's important to get familiar with those areas. Now, what you see from the outside, if you're a female anatomy baby, it's called a vulva, not a vagina. So that's an important distinction as well, is to teach your kids. I teach my daughter, I'm like, you know what? This is a vulva. Inside there is a vagina. And a lot of people call it the wrong name. And so she's known that since she was like 3. My son knows that too. And we'll have conversations like, oh, does Dada have a penis? Does Mama have a vulva? And it's very innocent and it's very normal. And then they want to know, oh, does Pati, which is grandma in Tamil, or does Tata, grandpa in Tamil, does Tata have this? Does Pati have that? And so we have those conversations. And sometimes it's also important to set the boundary again on where these conversations are appropriate. And so I'll say, we don't talk about people's bodies behind their back in a negative way. And we also don't ask people questions about their bodies because they might not be comfortable with it. If you have a question, we can talk about it when we're home. And so when they're 2 or 3, they might not understand that. Even when they're 4, they might not understand that. But as they get a little older, they do learn to understand where it's appropriate to ask certain questions and where it's not. And the reasoning I give behind that is just, I say, these are our private areas. These are personal to us. And it's none of our business what body parts somebody else has, ultimately, right? And I always like to preface that with is we don't assume that's just because somebody has short hair that they're a boy and somebody has long hair, they're a girl. We don't know what body parts they have. We don't know how they identify, and it's none of our business. But if we are curious, we can ask. We can say, how do I address you? But never is a child in a situation where they're like, I need to know whether this is a he or she or they. Do you know what I mean? Like, they just play naturally together. I just like to expose them to the fact that there are he, she, and they, and a combination. And we have friends and we have people in our circle who identify in different ways. So it's a beautiful thing for them to actually just witness, because they just learn that as normal and they don't learn that as abnormal. Something that my daughter said the other day that I was so proud of. And there was this kid at her school who was, we'd picked up our kids, and that kid's mom had picked up that kid. And she was like, she's like, girls and boys marry each other. Or like girls can only marry boys or something like that. And my daughter like looked up at, me, and then probably thinking like, is mommy going to say anything? But like literally split second, like just made eye contact with me. And she was like, that is not true. And she was so confident in how she said it. And that's it. She was just like, that is not true. And, of course, we were during pickup, so there was no time to like have a discussion around it. But that's what happens with kids. We don't have to have a full-blown 20-minute discussion about these things when they're so little. It's just about teaching them on a regular basis what the parts of their bodies are. When we give them a bath, I'm washing your bum, I'm washing your penis. Like, we're narrating this, we're saying this out loud. And it's also important because if, God forbid, they're being touched inappropriately, people aren't going to be like, I'm touching your penis. They're just going to do it. So they start to understand that the adults in my life who are responsible for me respect me. They are telling me what they're doing. They're making sure I'm okay with it. If I'm uncomfortable, they're going to stop, in terms of bathing, of course. And I'm clear with my kids is that, there's only these people who are allowed to give you a bath. And if anybody touches you other than, to help you wipe your bum in daycare or something, let us know right away. And there's nothing that you did nothing wrong. But this is, most adults and most people are kind and they respect your space, but some people don't. And so they understand that most people are good and most people are kind and most people are not pervs or pedophiles. But there are some people who are unkind or mean or whatever word you want to use in your household. There's some pretty strong words we can use, but I like to keep it as children appropriate as possible. So then they understand that, because I want them to be able to have the confidence of speaking up for themselves, telling mommy or daddy if something happens, telling mommy or daddy if they're uncomfortable, speaking up about like where it hurts. So sometimes, if one of my kids hasn't drank enough water, you know how your pee kind of burns when it comes out if you're really dehydrated? She can say specifically what's happening. My vulva is itchy, or if she hasn't had a bath, or she's itchy, my vulva is itchy, instead of just like not knowing how to describe that area. Or my urethra burns. She knows the word urethra, right? And both my kids do. And urethra is where your pee comes out of. You might think, why is this important? But do we know the parts of our mouth? Lips, teeth, gums, right? It's just basic knowledge. You don't have to know exactly what each tooth is called. In the same way, let's teach our kids, vulva. And then as they get older, this is your outer labia. This is your inner labia. And right from the beginning, I'm letting them know that their bodies are going to change over time. Their penis is going to look different because, the kids have even asked, how come you have hair? Well, that's just what happens when you hit a phase called puberty. When you get a little bit older, you go through these body changes. And then when, you keep getting older, your body keeps changing. How cool is that? Because I don't want to frame it in a negative way that their bodies are changing. I don't want them to think, oh God, I'm dreading this. I'm dreading my periods. I'm dreading this. I want them to look forward to and just accept that life is full of change in our bodies, in our thoughts. And so they start to accept even from now that all bodies look different. All bodies are different, and even our own body changes over time. So what have I gone over? I've talked about how from baby days you can start using diaper changes to teach them anatomy and get comfortable yourself saying these words out loud. Bath time is another great time. We have some great books, and I'll link that in the show notes as well because the names of these books escape me right now. But they're just talk about body consent, autonomy, like my body, my choice. And they're rated for like ages 8 and up. But honestly, my 5-year-old is great at we read it to her, and we started when she was like 4, 3 even. Because you don't have to read all the words, and you can just kind of explain the gist of like, who are your trusted adults, or who do you talk to if you're feeling unsafe or uncomfortable. And then the other thing is around consent with everything, explaining, asking, setting boundaries for yourself because you're modeling this for them. If there's no boundaries for you, if you're okay with your whole family coming in when you're pooping, that's great. But you should also explain that most people are not comfortable with this. So don't walk into a public toilet and open the door into somebody else, or if you're a kid in your class is in the neighboring stall, like don't peek under and don't be giggling about it because that's disrespectful, right? And there's kids who do this stuff, right? And I remember kids who were like way too old. They should have known better, but they still do it. And I do think we need to explicitly have these conversations with our kids because we don't know what they're thinking and we don't know what actions they will do. So I would rather preemptively have these conversations, and 100% I will have missed something. We can't cover all of our bases because sometimes we don't even know what conversations to have. But some of the things, I just mentioned, boundaries, consent, naming their body parts factually. When I was pregnant with my second, my daughter would ask me like, where's baby made? We had this great book about how babies are made. And of course we changed some of the language to make it more gender inclusive and inclusive to different types of families, because in the book there was a mom and dad, and we said some families have one mom, or some families have one dad, or a grandpa, or 2 moms, or 3 moms. There's different ways that families are, so that they start to understand from a young age that just because my family looks like this doesn't mean all families look like this, and doesn't mean I get to make fun of another kid or point at another kid because single them out because their family looks different than mine, right? I don't want them to have a default. I want them to understand that whatever each person's family is like, that is how it is, and we respect that. And then, we haven't talked about sex per se yet. I think they're still quite young for that, but it depends. If they had asked questions, I probably would have explained just very basically, what happens. But in the book, in the reproduction book that we have, it does say that like when a sperm from a, male and an egg from a female meet, sometimes a baby can happen. So they know that the sperm and egg is required for reproduction. But they don't know how the sperm is getting to the egg. We haven't had that conversation yet. I do think we need to respect kid-led learning rather than forcing lessons upon them. Kids are naturally curious and they're going to ask questions, just like they look at your pubic hair and they're like, why do you have that? Why do you have armpit hair and daddy doesn't? Or why does daddy have armpit hair and you don't? So I say, I shave because that's a socially accepted norm for people who are women. But there are many women who don't shave, and that's really cool too, because I don't shave all the time either. So they're understanding not only why that we do things or don't do things based on social norms, but also that social norms are kind of arbitrary and we don't have to follow them, right? So there's so many things that I feel like are just ingrained in the way that I interact with my kids. And it's not just me, it's also my husband. I think that it's important that both parents, or if there are two parents or three parents or one parent, whoever, are on the same board, on the same boat with this. And sometimes that's not going to happen because your partner may be really uncomfortable talking about any of this. Many of our homes are very like purity culture, like never talk about these things. So not everyone's going to feel comfortable talking about it. But try when your kids are young, because as they get older, the questions are going to get harder. And if you're so uncomfortable talking about this, they're not going to go to you for those questions. They're going to Google things, and you know what's going to happen when you Google stuff. So I would rather be uncomfortable early on when they're young than be like, oh crap, we've never uttered the word sex, we've never talked about this, and now they're 15 asking me these questions, or they're not talking to me and they're hiding something from me, and I don't know what to do, right? And so now if you're listening to this and you have older kids, I'm not the best resource for that because I haven't personally experienced it, and a lot of the people that I work with do have younger kids. However, there's Sex Positive Families, which is a fantastic account, and they have courses on this as well. And I did take a course on how to talk to kids about sex, and it covered all age kids. And it was just about kind of the same things I just talked about. It's not one conversation, it's many conversations. And it's also, I don't want to put the burden of safety on my daughter. So I don't talk about, oh, well, you should wear these types of clothing because other people might. No, we don't do that because it is not her job to uphold, to make sure that she's safe. It's society's job. My job is to teach her environments that she feels uncomfortable in and comfortable in. And same with my son, because I don't know the actual stats on child sexual abuse, but they're high. And for both boys and girls, and I'm pretty sure it's higher for boys, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me on that because I didn't actually look it up. But these things do happen, and many times they happen from people in your own household, family, or close circles. So it's important for me to know that I've taught my kids that even if it's coming from within the family, they can tell me, right? Or they can tell me and my husband if you're on the same page with this conversation. What else? I think that was what I really wanted to cover in this conversation. I didn't make notes, as you can see. I just kind of shared based on my own experience. And just understand that most kids that their age, I know most kids their age don't know any of that stuff. Most kids will probably call it hoo-ha or private parts, privates, and that's okay. And I always tell my kids, other families teach their kids different things, and that's okay. But this is what we learn about. They know when mommy gets her period, so they can, get my heat pack if I'm having cramps, or they understand and they respect that boundary. And it takes time. It's not like the first period you get, they're going to just understand. It's repetition. Every month they're learning the same stuff so that they start to put together that pattern, and then they're like, oh, okay, like this is what happens. And then it's so cute. Even my son will be like, is your period done? And he like wants to look in the toilet and like see the blood, and all that is just normal to him and normal to my daughter. And I think that is beautiful, because the first time I had my period, I had no idea I was going to get it that early. Thankfully, I had learned about it at school because my mom never told me about it. And I don't think it's solely a mom's responsibility to talk to daughters about their periods. I think dads also need to be comfortable with this, because there are many situations where my dad would get me pads from, the drugstore or wherever. The responsibility of teaching all this should not all be on the mother. So I really encourage you, if you're listening to this, have your partner, if you have a male partner, listen to this as well, because these conversations can happen on both parties. The conversation around consent, around respecting body, autonomy, choices, and never forcing your kids to like hug someone that they don't want to hug. So this was really hard for me because I wanted my kids to hug my parents, hug me. But even I will say to them, do you want to hug? Do you want to hug Pati and Tata? And then most of the time they're like, yeah. But sometimes they're like, no. I'm like, okay. And you can see the disappointment in their eyes, my parents' eyes. But I'm like, you know what? And I will say, we respect your choice. You can maybe try again another time, right? And that's it. It doesn't have to be a big deal every time. And if the adult makes a big deal out of it, it is not your responsibility to pacify their feelings. Ultimately, if your goal is to raise a child who is confident and empowered in their body, just remember that that's your goal. And just say, you have to respect our choices. He's his own person. She's her own person. They're their own person. They don't want to give a hug right now. And that's it. And no guilt tripping. Oh, grandma's so disappointed, or your uncle's so disappointed. You're not going to see him for 6 months. Why don't you just, no, 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 no. Because what is that telling the child? It's telling the child that you're putting other people's feelings of ahead of their feeling of safety in their own body, their feeling of autonomy in their own body. And that's the last thing I want. So I hope that some of these ideas sparked some ideas for you, or not some of these ideas, some of these conversations spark some ideas for you on how you can incorporate these conversations with your child or children, or even if you have nieces or nephews, because not all parents care about this. First of all, they don't even think about this. They think, oh, the puberty talk comes when they're like 9, right? But girls are getting periods earlier. People are developing at all sorts of ages, and you might have your kids may be interacting with people of other ages as well, going to a friend's house, and then there's an older sibling present. And I also want them to understand that just because it's another kid, they still have to respect their body and respect their space. And sometimes older children, they get this feeling of like control and power over these little kids, and they may unintentionally tickle or touch or be in a little kid's space. And so I want my kids to know, first of all, they're being monitored, especially when they're young. They're not being just left to themselves. And that's my personal choice, and our family, our family's choice, and your family might have different rules and whatnot, boundaries or, flexibility around that. But I'm just sharing what we do. But it's also important because other families may not know what safe touch and unsafe touch is, or what consent even means. And so your job is not to teach every kid in the neighborhood, although like I wish all kids knew this, and all parents knew this. Your job is to teach your child and also empower them to speak up for themselves when they can, when it's appropriate. And until they can do that, you're their voice, right? So whether you have to go talk to the school or the daycare or wherever, you're their voice. And so getting comfortable having these conversations at home will be a great way for you to advocate for them outside the home if and when you have to. Because I like to say when, because rather than if, because there's always going to be some conversation you're going to have with your kids' teachers or daycare workers or wherever. And so rather than being shocked when you have to, I just like to be like, all right, okay, so this is the conversation we have to go have. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be tough, but I can do this, right? And you can do this wherever you are in your parenting journey. If you have a newborn to if you have a 10, 15-year-old. I'm sorry I didn't provide a lot of like teenage specific tips because, again, I don't have lived experience with that. I think whether it's a child psychologist or sex therapist might have more information around that, which is why I love the Sex Positive Families page. They have courses for kids of all ages, but I think that consent and that boundaries and respect needs to start from the second they're born rather than waiting for like when they're 5 or 10 to start those conversations. So if you enjoy this conversation, please share this with a friend. Go review Mom Strength right now because these reviews really help y'all. They help other people understand what the benefit of listening to this podcast is, what they'll get out of it, and teach them where they can find help. Thank you so much for listening. Love you. Have a great night.